So I'll try to keep it short, but I want to kind of go through everything that's happened up to this point, and that way we'll all know what has taken place up to this point where we are now. So let's jump into that. So it's a 1966 Suburban that I found in Vermont, actually. I guess it spent a bunch of time in Arizona, but got it for $2,800 with a big block 396 running on about 6.5 cylinders. So the Suburban sits around my shop for like a year, not doing much, and kind of toyed with the idea, putting a motor together for it, just doing something with it in general, but didn't know what. And the conversation has kind of gone around like, you should do something turbo. And I said, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. I haven't done that before. And started doing my research. And I think at that time there was that seafoam green truck with like all the bare metal colored bodywork under the hood and like all the dimple dyes in the holes that like just came out in Detroit that year. I'm like, well, I can't do an LS because everybody thinks I'm just making a copy of that truck. So how about a Ford? Because I've got those laying around thanks to the construction company that's next door to my shop. They just retired a fleet of 97 to 03 F-150s, and all the motors and trainings were good, and they pulled them out. So I said, well, I got a bunch of those I can use. And then I could make it a 4-valve by putting the heads on it. And it's just the front cover and an intake. It's just that simple. And I'll have a 5.4 liter 4-valve engine. So slowly, not in any kind of rush, we pulled the big block out and I started cleaning the frame up and kind of just mocking up this whole how to get the 4-valve in the Suburban chassis. And we're probably like a month into this, and something came up online, and it was like, fill out this form and get invited to the Carcraft Summer Nationals. Just, put a picture of a car you would bring and your information. So I'm like, well, the answer is no if you never, do anything. So I fill out my name, info, picture of the 70 Chevelle that I had built, and it was sitting around my shop. And I said, all right, let's send it off. Well, sure enough, I get a reply from a fellow named Harrison Card. And he's like, hey, we saw your stuff. I don't know if you'd like to do that. Could you attend? I'm like, absolutely. And then it turned into, hey, do you have anything else you could bring? We have another spot. I was like, I've got something I'm working on. I could probably get it done. And so we did. The rush to get the Suburban done was on. So now I'm officially invited to this Carcraft Summer Nationals thing. So it's like game time. We have to do all of the airbag suspension stuff to the Suburban. 9-inch rear, big disc brakes, Hydro Boost, fuel system, all the motor and tranny stuff, like everything. Suddenly from a casual project to holy crap, all hands on deck. My shop's in the middle of construction, so the shop's an absolute war zone. There's walls missing and just stuff piled everywhere, and it's dirty and dingy, and lights aren't hung up. I mean, it was just an absolute mess trying to get the shop started this time. So yeah, I ordered a 6R80 on eBay for $1,000. Got that shipped. eBayed some old Navigator heads. Found a new old stock, like front cover. Had a friend of mine put the bottom end together. I got some better parts for it. Just threw the stock heads after I cleaned them up and the washer on this thing. Got that Holley intake manifold with the MMR adapter plates. I used the Power by the Hour kit, which uses the Coyote computer and their streamlined harness. I got this thing all hooked up, and I rattle can finished the motor, made it look all pretty, and got it hooked up, and it kind of ran sometimes. Like it started. Like, I couldn't get it to really move right and run and rev up at all. I think I'd messed up some wiring on the electric throttle body and some other various mass airflow sensor problems. But it was together for the show, and we got both cars down there in a matter of like 2 months from when I sent the email to Showtime. So, took it down to Bowling Green, Kentucky. It was hotter than anything I've ever experienced. It was probably 110 in the shade, about 847% humidity. But it was awesome to be there as a young guy, to get invited to that and like preferential treatment to park in this place as like a guest, and then got to meet Jacob Ross Davis, and he wrote some really nice things about me in an online article. I mean, it was like really cool. So after the allure of that wore off, it was, hey, this thing's cool. There's a picture of it in the magazine. It really needs to run right and do the cool stuff, or else this is pointless. So messed around trying to make a different intake tube for the mass airflow sensor to have a better straight line airflow. So I took the front entrance manifold off. Holley made that carburetor flange coyote manifold, and then I made an adapter for the forward throttle body to go to a 4150 flange, so it was vertical at that time. And then I made a long, we called it like the choo-choo intake, to give the mass airflow a long straight stretch. Put that all in there, and still ran exactly the same, no improvement. I just could not get it to work right with the stock ECU. So gave up on that, decided to take the plunge into Holley EFI at this point. That was my first real HP system. I'd done snipers and stuff, had not done a full-blown HP system. So get that all on there, rip all the wiring out, get the Holley in there, learn about having to have separate coil drivers because the Ford coils and all that wiring. And at that time, I think I just bought like a universal HP, so I had to like wire all the hard stuff and had guys help me wire all the hard stuff to make it work. And it would kind of start, but not great, and it would stall, and I couldn't get it to run. And like learning how to do system logs and check for cam and crank signal. It turns out I could not get a cam and crank signal worth a crap. So then I learned about the sensors from Redline, so I had to wire those in, and it worked a little better, but then I would keep losing sync. So then it was, okay, screw the internal reluctor. I've got this small block Ford trigger wheel kit sitting on the shelf. Looks like the bolt pattern's pretty close to my modular balancer. Well, 40 thousandths oversized on the Bridgeport got me the bolts I needed to get it on the balancer. And then I kind of cobbled this thing from the mount that I got with the Redline sensor, and I used that to locate it. Then I put the Hall effect sensor on that outside the engine to read that wheel. So it was a whole thing. But after that, now we're running. Not awful. Got the mufflers closed up right now in the cutout, so it's pretty mild. So I was ready to like dyno this thing finally. Strap it to the rollers, see what's going on. I get it in the building, I strap it down. Turn out the lights that night thinking, man, tomorrow's going to be a great day. Walk back in the next morning, get ready to go. I start it and it's got a terrible skip. It's like, okay, what could possibly have happened in the 7 hours I've been gone from this building that now it's got a skip? It turns out in those early 4150 style manifolds, they didn't just use like a super thick flange for your threads on the carb flange. There was this really weird cast flange thing with like these cast on threads from underneath that looked like a little bullet. Well, when you get your bolts tight for your carb style flange, it would crack off this little dome-looking piece of aluminum that was also the threads for the bottom of that flange. And apparently, I don't know if it was running and bouncing around on the port the evening before, and when I shut the engine off, it just perfectly fell into the chamber, or what. But basically, that piece had fallen off the inside of the manifold, down into cylinder 1, got under the valves, bent the valves, put mark in the piston, and I was like, alright, okay. Perfect. Was really going somewhere, and then, once again, kicking the nuts. So, after letting it sit for another month to punish it, take the motor back out, and decide, well, while it's out, I never really did treat the heads right, so let's, do a valve job, get better valves, all the springs, make sure the lifters are all actually good, if not new, and get a better oil pump, because I bought some Ford Performance pump, but I didn't think it had the billet gears, because it wasn't expensive enough to have billet gears, so did the right pump, all the typical Ford upgrades, put it back in there. And that's when it led to, alright, time to make the next version of a real nice front entry manifold, which led me to the high ram style. But of course, they don't make a high ram for a Coyote, and they certainly didn't in 2016. So I already had the carburetor style manifold on the engine. So I said, well, if I can get a flange or copy a flange, I can just cut the top of this manifold off in theory, and then weld my own flange on it. And sure enough, Holley sells a flange, which is made to make your own top, I believe, but I use it to make my own bottom half. So I bought the flange, cut the manifold apart, welded the flange to it, and now I had a high ram top, and it wasn't perfect. I had to take it to my buddy's shop, and he CNC'd the actual flange level and square, so the thing would seal. So now we got a real high ram looking style manifold. It runs on Holley, we are going to be good to go. So that brings us up to the year before last, 2019. I have the Suburban all back together, running, start doing some street pulls. I'm having some weird ignition breakup for a while, and instead of just going through everything, I just kind of keep trying some tune things, some timing, some fuel. Long story short, I figured out that I had switched over to LS coils and never changed my dwell settings from 1.5 up to 3.5, so that got rid of the ignition problem, and then I was like, man, my map sensor is reading really high. Well, the map sensor was not reading high, it was reading correctly, and I had forgotten to put an 1/8" pipe plug in each one of the wastegates from the get-go and never noticed it on 3 engine removals and installs because the thing had never run well enough to make boost. So when it did, I was like, oh, something's going to be wrong with the sensor. Nope, it was correct, and I was running about 28 pounds of boost on 91 octane fuel a dozen times on the interstate, so I've been told, you can't break a piston when it's liquid, and it melted the pistons, which is why the motor came out the year before last, and I was just so discouraged at this point for me being stupid and the thing was being broken that I let it sit. So now it's time to get it done. Got the fresh short block here again, got most of the parts in this room somewhere, so from now on the videos are going to be getting the engine together, getting it in, transmission stuff, E85 fuel system, flex fuel setup, boost control, all the stuff that everybody else has been doing for 5-10 years now. So that is the plan. Thanks for watching. It was probably pretty slow at times, but we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.